The message arrived during breakfast at the Earth Defense Coalition headquarters in Geneva. Ambassador David Reynolds was reviewing mining reports from the Proxima colonies when his aide burst through the door with a datapad that glowed with an unfamiliar blue light. The quantum encryption signature was unlike anything in human databases, and the translation software struggled with symbols that seemed to shift and change as they watched. Dr. Amy Foster arrived 20 minutes later, her coffee still steaming as she examined the alien communication. As Earth's leading xenolinguist and theoretical physicist, she had spent years preparing for this moment, but the reality felt surreal. The message was formal, ancient, and carried the weight of civilizations far older than humanity. The Galactic Council extends an invitation to the species known as humans. Amy read aloud, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the words. You are summoned to present yourselves before the 12 ruling houses at the Nexus Station in the Altair system. This honor has not been granted to a developing species in 847 standard years. David leaned back in his chair, his diplomatic training kicking in as he processed the implications. Humanity had been aware of other intelligent species for only 30 years, since the first contact with the Cetian traders. Most galactic races treated humans as curiosities at best, primitive newcomers who had barely learned to leave their home system. The idea that the legendary Galactic Council even knew humanity existed was shocking enough, but to receive a formal invitation was unprecedented. The journey to Altair took 6 days aboard the UES Horizon, humanity's most advanced diplomatic vessel. David spent the time reviewing everything known about the Council races, while Amy worked on preparing translation protocols and cultural briefings. The ship's AI provided constant updates on the Nexus Station, a massive construct that had orbited the binary stars for over 10,000 years when they finally arrived. The scale of the station defied comprehension. It was larger than Earth's moon, with flowing organic curves that seemed to pulse with internal light. Countless ships from dozens of species docked at various levels, creating a constant stream of traffic that made Earth's busiest spaceports look like rural airstrips. The tall grays met them at the docking bay, their elongated forms moving with practiced efficiency. Their leader, who introduced himself as Administrator Quinn, spoke in perfectly accented English that somehow felt condescending despite its technical correctness. The Council has prepared quarters for your brief stay. You will be given time to acclimate before your formal presentation tomorrow. As they walked through the station's corridors, David and Amy observed the incredible diversity of galactic civilization. The crystalline architects towered above everyone else, their faceted bodies refracting light into rainbow patterns. Energy beings called luminari drifted through specialized containment fields, their forms shifting between different states of matter. The collectors moved in perfect synchronization, their hive mind allowing them to coordinate complex tasks without apparent communication. How many species are represented here? Amy asked Quinn during their tour. The Council recognizes 347 intelligent species across the galaxy, Quinn replied. Most have found their proper place in the galactic order. Those who have not are guided toward appropriate roles that benefit all. David caught the subtle threat in those words. The Council clearly saw itself as the ultimate authority on what each species should become. The tour continued through vast chambers where different environmental conditions allowed various species to coexist. Everything was perfectly ordered, efficiently managed, and somehow lifeless despite the incredible diversity. Their quarters were spacious, but sterile, designed to accommodate human physiology while making it clear that this was a temporary arrangement. That evening they received their first real briefing about the Council's intentions. A holographic display showed the rapid expansion of human colonies, the trade networks they were establishing, and the technological developments that were beginning to concern some Council members. Your species has grown remarkably quickly, Administrator Quinn explained. In just 30 years, you have established colonies in 7 systems and begun mining operations in 12 others. This level of expansion is unusual for a species at your development stage. Amy studied the data carefully. Are we violating some kind of galactic law? Not law exactly, but the Council maintains stability through careful management of growth and development. Your rapid expansion has created certain imbalances that need to be addressed. The next morning brought their first glimpse of the council chambers. The vast circular room could have held a small city, with seating areas designed for every conceivable form of intelligent life. At the center sat the 12 ruling houses, each representing a different approach to galactic governance. The ancient ones claimed authority through age and wisdom. The builders controlled infrastructure and technology. The guardians maintained military order. Each house had found its niche and defended it jealously. The session began with formal introductions that took over an hour. Each council member spoke in their native language, with translation provided through neural implants that felt invasive and cold. The tone was polite but distant, treating the humans like interesting specimens rather than equals. Finally, the first speaker rose. The ancient being had served as council leader for over 3 centuries, and their words carried the weight of absolute authority. Species human, you have been brought before this council because your actions threaten the stability we have maintained for nearly a millennium. Your rapid expansion, your unpredictable innovations, and your tendency toward chaotic growth patterns concern us. David stood to respond, but the first speaker continued. We have prepared a development plan that will guide your species toward a more suitable role in galactic civilization. You will limit your expansion to your current 3 systems, except council advisors to guide your technological development, and focus your efforts on resource extraction for the greater galactic good. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The council wasn't offering partnership or guidance. They were demanding submission. Amy felt her stomach tighten as she realized the true purpose of their invitation. This wasn't an honor or an opportunity. It was a formal notice that humanity's independence was about to end. We request time to consider your proposal, David said carefully, his diplomatic training helping him maintain composure despite the shock. The first speaker nodded graciously. You have until tomorrow to provide your response. The council is generous in allowing you this time to accept the inevitable. As they left the chamber, Amy whispered to David, "They're not giving us a choice. They're giving us time to realize we don't have one." But David had spent his career dealing with impossible situations, and something in the council's absolute certainty told him they had never faced a species quite like humanity. Tomorrow would bring their response, and it would not be what the council expected. The data projectors hummed to life as Amy connected her portable systems to the council's ancient technology. She had worked through the night, preparing something that would either change everything or get them both killed. The chamber filled with 3-dimensional displays showing star charts, resource analyses, and technological specifications that made several council members lean forward with interest. "Honored Council," David began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber without amplification. "We have studied your proposal carefully. We understand your concerns about stability and order. However, we believe there may be alternatives that benefit everyone." The first speaker's expression remained neutral, but Amy caught subtle shifts in posture among the other council members. Some seemed curious, others appeared annoyed that the humans weren't simply accepting their fate. The Dominion Lords in particular radiated disapproval at this unexpected development. "Rather than limiting human expansion," David continued, "we propose a partnership that could solve problems the Council has faced for centuries. Dr. Foster will demonstrate what humanity can contribute to galactic civilization." Amy stepped forward, her hands moving across the control interface with practiced precision. The first display showed a detailed analysis of the Kepler-7 system, where the native population had been slowly dying from soil depletion and atmospheric degradation. Council records indicated the world had been classified as terminal for over 200 years. "The Kepler-7 situation has been studied extensively," Amy explained. "Every solution proposed required massive resource investment with uncertain outcomes. However, human agricultural science suggests a different approach. The display shifted to show cellular-level analysis of the planet's ecosystem, highlighting specific bacterial chains that could be modified to restore soil fertility. The architect representative, Kira, spoke for the first time. These modifications would require biological expertise we do not possess. The risk of ecosystem collapse would be enormous. Not if we combine human biotechnology with architect construction techniques, Amy replied smoothly. The display changed, again showing how human-designed biological systems could work within architect-built environmental controls. Your crystalline structures could provide perfect growing environments while our bacterial modifications restore natural cycles. Several council members began talking among themselves, their various languages creating a complex harmony of sounds. Amy continued her presentation, showing how human manufacturing techniques could repair failing infrastructure, how human logistics systems could optimize resource distribution, and how human medical knowledge could address diseases that had plagued certain species for generations. The collector's spokesperson, 9 of many, interrupted with a mechanical voice that seemed to come from multiple sources simultaneously. These proposals assume cooperation between species with different biological and technological foundations. Our analysis indicates high probability of failure. Our analysis indicates high probability of success, Amy countered. Human history shows that our greatest achievements come from combining different approaches. We don't see species differences as obstacles. We see them as opportunities. The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives debated the implications. The luminary energy beings pulsed with agitation, while the collectors maintained their usual unity but with visible tension. The ancient ones, who rarely spoke during council sessions, exchanged glances that seemed to carry centuries of unspoken communication. David seized the moment to address the council's deepest concerns. We understand that rapid change can be frightening. Your records speak of ancient wars that nearly destroyed galactic civilization. But we've studied those conflicts, and they weren't caused by growth or innovation. They were caused by stagnation, leading to desperation. The first speaker's eyes narrowed. You claim to understand events that occurred before your species developed written language? We understand the pattern, David replied. When societies stop growing, they start fighting. Over what remains? When they stop innovating, they start stealing innovations from others. The galaxy hasn't been at peace for 1,000 years because of your restrictions. It's been dying slowly. The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence. Several council members rose from their seats, their various forms expressing outrage in different ways. The Dominion Lords particularly seemed ready to end the session immediately, but the first speaker raised a hand for silence. These are serious allegations, the first speaker said slowly. Do you have evidence to support such claims? Amy activated a new display showing galactic population statistics, technological development rates, and resource utilization patterns spanning the last millennium. The data painted a clear picture of civilizational decline masked by political stability. Birth rates are declining across 60% of known species, Amy explained. Technological advancement has slowed to near zero in most sectors. Resource extraction is becoming less efficient even as consumption decreases. These are symptoms of a dying civilization, not a thriving one. The architect Kira stood abruptly. You suggest that our greatest achievement, galactic peace, is actually a form of death? We suggest that peace without growth is just slow extinction, David replied. Humanity offers something different. We offer the chance to live again. The debate that followed was unlike anything in council history. Species that had remained silent for decades began voicing concerns they had suppressed for centuries. The younger members of various delegations, many of whom had never been allowed to speak in formal sessions, began sharing perspectives that challenged fundamental assumptions about galactic governance. The luminary representative, a being of pure energy called Brightpath, spoke with a voice like singing crystals. Among our people, the young ones ask questions we cannot answer. They wonder why we cannot explore beyond our designated regions, why we cannot study forbidden technologies, why we cannot grow beyond our assigned roles. Similar admissions came from other species. The rigid caste systems that had maintained order were beginning to crack under pressure from individuals who refused to accept their predetermined limitations. The Council's authority was being questioned not just by humanity, but by their own people. As the session continued, it became clear that the Council was facing its first real crisis in centuries. The traditionalists, led by the Dominion Lords, argued that human chaos would destroy everything they had built. The progressives, inspired by the possibility of renewal, began questioning whether their current system was worth preserving. The first speaker finally called for order, but the damage was done. The absolute unity that had defined the Council for a millennium was shattered. "This session is adjourned pending further deliberation," the first speaker announced. "The Council will reconvene in 3 days to render judgment on the human proposals." As the chamber emptied, Amy and David found themselves surrounded by representatives from various species, some hostile, others curious, all wanting to know more about this strange new perspective on galactic civilization. The architect Kira approached them directly. "Your proposals are intriguing," she said, her crystalline form catching the chamber's light. "But they assume other species will embrace the same chaotic growth patterns that define humanity." "What? If we prefer our current stability?" David smiled. "Then you're free to choose stability. But shouldn't others be free to choose growth? Shouldn't young Luminari be able to explore beyond their boundaries? Shouldn't collector individuals be able to think independently if they want to?" The question seemed to strike at the heart of everything the Council represented. As they left the chamber, Amy whispered to David, "I think we just started a revolution." "No," David replied, watching the heated discussions continuing throughout the station. "I think we just gave permission for a revolution that was already waiting to happen." The emergency session convened with unprecedented urgency as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The first speaker's usual composure showed cracks of strain as they processed the implications of what was happening. 3 days had passed since the human presentation, and the effects were spreading faster than anyone had anticipated. "The situation on Kepler-7 has escalated beyond our projections," Administrator Quinn reported, his elongated form tense with concern. "The human team has not only implemented their proposed soil restoration, but has begun teaching the native population advanced agricultural techniques. Food production has increased by 300% in just 72 hours. Amy felt a surge of pride mixed with anxiety. The demonstration had been her idea, but she hadn't anticipated how quickly the Kepler-7 inhabitants would embrace the new methods. The reports showed images of previously barren fields now showing green shoots, of native farmers working alongside human technicians, of children playing in areas that had been dead wastelands just days before. "This violates established protocols," the Dominion Lord Vex declared, his armored form radiating disapproval. "Species development must be carefully managed to prevent cultural contamination and technological disruption." David stepped forward from the witness area. "The Kepler-7 natives asked for our help. We didn't force anything on them. We simply offered alternatives to slow death." The displays shifted to show the second demonstration site at the galaxy's edge, where the ancient defensive network had been failing for decades. The border stations were massive structures built by the architects millennia ago, designed to detect and repel threats from outside the galaxy. Budget constraints and technological limitations had left many systems operating at minimal capacity. "The human engineering team has achieved remarkable results," the architect Kira admitted reluctantly. "They identified inefficiencies in our original designs that we had not considered. Their modifications have increased sensor range by 40% and reduced power consumption by half." The display showed human technicians working alongside architect engineers, their different approaches complementing each other in ways that neither species had achieved alone. The defensive network was not just repaired, but enhanced beyond its original specifications. "More concerning," the Collector 9 of many reported in their mechanical harmony, "is the response from our own populations. Young members of multiple Species are questioning established roles and requesting transfers to work with human teams. Our social stability indices are showing unprecedented fluctuations. The reports continued, painting a picture of a galaxy in rapid transition. On 17 different worlds, species that had accepted limitations for centuries were suddenly pushing boundaries. The rigid hierarchy that had maintained order was being challenged by individuals who had found new inspiration in human examples. Amy watched the council members' reactions carefully. The older representatives seemed genuinely frightened by the pace of change, while younger members appeared energized by the possibilities. The division was becoming more apparent with each report. There have been incidents, the Dominion Lord Vex continued, his voice carrying ominous undertones. Equipment failures at the Kepler 7 restoration sites. Communication breakdowns in the defensive network upgrades. Accidents that suggest sabotage rather than coincidence. David's expression hardened. Are you accusing someone of deliberately undermining the demonstrations? We are reporting facts, Vex replied coldly. The galaxy maintained stability for a millennium before human interference. These disruptions began only after your arrival. The first speaker raised a hand for silence. The Council recognizes the complexity of the current situation. However, we must address the fundamental question: are these changes beneficial to galactic civilization, or do they represent a dangerous deviation from proven stability? The debate that followed revealed the deep philosophical divide that had been growing within the Council. The progressives, led by Kira and supported by younger members of various species, argued that the demonstrations proved the value of human innovation and cooperation. The traditionalists, dominated by the Dominion Lords and the Ancient Ones, maintained that any change this rapid was inherently dangerous. Amy requested permission to present additional data. The sabotage incidents mentioned by Lord Vex follow a specific pattern. They target the most successful integration points between human and alien technologies. This suggests the interference comes from someone with detailed knowledge of both systems. The implication was clear, though she didn't state it directly. The sabotage was coming from within the Council itself, from those who preferred to see the demonstrations fail rather than succeed. The Luminari, Representative Brightpath, pulsed with agitation. Our energy matrix detected anomalous transmissions from this station to both demonstration sites. The source appears to be Council communication systems. The chamber erupted in accusations and denials. The careful diplomatic language that had characterized Council proceedings for centuries dissolved into barely contained hostility. Species that had maintained polite cooperation for millennia were suddenly confronting each other with centuries of suppressed grievances. Enough! The first speaker commanded, their ancient voice cutting through the chaos. This council will not dissolve into chaos because of human provocation. With respect, David said, his diplomatic training helping him maintain calm in the storm. We didn't provoke anything. We simply offered possibilities that already existed. The fact that so many species are embracing these changes suggests they were ready for them. The first speaker studied David with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. You speak of readiness, but you cannot comprehend the consequences of the changes you propose. The last time the galaxy experienced rapid transformation, billions died in the resulting conflicts. And how many are dying now from stagnation? Amy countered. How many species are slowly declining because they're forbidden to grow? How many individuals are trapped in roles they never chose because change is considered dangerous? The questions hung in the air like accusations. The Council had built its authority on the premise that stability was worth any sacrifice, but the demonstrations were proving that the sacrifices might be greater than anyone had realized. The session continued for hours, with representatives from across the galaxy calling in to report similar patterns. Species that had been resigned to decline were suddenly finding new energy. Young individuals who had accepted their limitations were questioning everything. The rigid social structures that had maintained order were bending under pressure from those who had found new hope. As the reports accumulated, it became clear that the demonstrations had triggered something far larger than anyone had anticipated. The galaxy was experiencing its first taste of real change in centuries, and the response was overwhelming. The Council faces an unprecedented decision, the first speaker finally announced. The human proposals have proven more disruptive than anticipated. We must determine whether this disruption represents renewal or destruction. The vote was scheduled for the following day, but Amy could see in the faces around the chamber that the decision would be more than just about humanity's future. It would determine whether the galaxy would continue its slow decline into peaceful death, or embrace the chaotic vitality that came with growth and change. As they left the chamber, the architect Kira approached them with something that might have been concern. Your species has awakened something that has been sleeping for a long time. I hope you understand the magnitude of what you have started. David nodded grimly. We understand that sometimes the choice isn't between good and bad. Sometimes it's between dying slowly and living dangerously. The next 24 hours would determine which path the galaxy would choose. The ancient voting chamber had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, but nothing in its 10,000-year history compared to the chaos that erupted when the first speaker called for the formal vote on humanity's future. The chamber's crystalline walls, designed to amplify and harmonize all voices, created a cacophony as representatives from 347 species shouted, argued, and demanded to be heard simultaneously. Amy watched from the observation deck as the Galactic Council experienced its first complete breakdown of order. The architect Kira stood at the center of the progressive faction, her crystalline form blazing with reflected light as she gestured emphatically. Around her, representatives from dozens of species nodded agreement, their various forms creating a living constellation of support for change. The evidence is undeniable, Kira declared, her voice cutting through the noise. Human involvement has achieved in days what we have failed to accomplish in centuries. The Kepler-7 restoration alone has saved a species from extinction. The defensive network improvements have already prevented 2 incursions that would have cost thousands of lives. The traditionalist response came from the Dominion Lord Vex, whose armored form seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. And what of the social disruption? Young collectors abandoning their hive duties? Luminary energy beings attempting to travel beyond their designated zones? Architect apprentices questioning construction protocols that have stood for millennia? The Collector 9 of Many spoke with their characteristic mechanical harmony, but Amy detected subtle variations that suggested internal conflict. Analysis indicates 47% of our young generation units have requested individual designation codes. This represents unprecedented deviation from collective consciousness protocols. Perhaps, interrupted a voice from the progressive side. Individual consciousness is not deviation but evolution. The speaker was a young collector who had somehow separated from their collective, their mechanical form bearing modifications that looked suspiciously like human engineering influences. The chamber fell silent at this impossible sight. A collector individual was theoretical, not practical. Designation Solo 1, as the separated collector continued. Personal choice, cooperation with human innovation teams. Result, enhanced individual capability while maintaining collective benefit. Conclusion, traditional limitations were artificial. Constructs, not biological necessities. The reaction was immediate and explosive. The older collectors began broadcasting distress signals, their mechanical voices creating a harmony of panic. The Dominion Lords activated personal shields, treating the individual collector as a potential threat. The ancient ones who had remained silent throughout most of the proceedings suddenly became animated with concern. This is exactly what we feared, the first speaker said, their ancient voice carrying across the chaos. The humans have not brought improvement. They have brought dissolution of the very foundations that hold galactic civilization together. David rose from his position in the witness area, his diplomatic training allowing him to project calm authority. Despite the chaos around him, with respect, first speaker, we haven't dissolved anything. We've revealed that some of your foundations were built on assumptions rather than necessities. assumptions that prevented galactic war for 1,000 years. The ancient one called Memory Keeper replied, their voice carrying the weight of millennia. You speak of growth and change as if they have no cost. We remember the cost. We remember the billions who died when the galaxy last embraced chaos. Amy activated her portable display system, projecting historical data that she had been analyzing since their arrival. The records show that the ancient wars weren't caused by growth or innovation. They were caused by resource scarcity and territorial disputes, the same problems that are growing worse under the current system. The display showed population decline curves, resource depletion rates, and technological stagnation indicators that painted a picture of impending civilization collapse. The galaxy's current peace was not sustainable. It was a slow-motion catastrophe disguised as stability. Furthermore, Amy continued, the historical records show evidence of systematic alteration. Key events have been reinterpreted to support the narrative that change equals chaos. The actual data suggests that periods of innovation and growth were the most peaceful and prosperous in galactic history. The accusation of historical manipulation sent shockwaves through the chamber. The ancient ones, who claimed authority based on their role as keepers of galactic memory, found themselves facing charges of deliberately distorting that memory to maintain power. These allegations are serious, the first speaker said, their composure finally cracking. Do you accuse the Council of deliberately falsifying historical records? We accuse the Council of interpreting history to support predetermined conclusions, David replied carefully. The question is whether those interpretations serve the galaxy's best interests or just maintain the status quo. The debate that followed revealed fractures in the Council that had been building for centuries. Species that had accepted secondary roles began questioning why they couldn't pursue their own development. Young representatives who had been silent during countless sessions suddenly found voices to challenge decisions made by their elders. The luminary Brightpath spoke with unusual intensity, their energy form pulsing with agitation. Among our people, the young ones ask why we cannot explore beyond our designated regions. When we answer that it is council law, they ask why council law supersedes natural curiosity. We have no answer that satisfies them. Similar admissions came from other species. The rigid social structures that had maintained order were being questioned by those who had to live within them. The council's authority was being challenged not just by humanity, but by their own people who had found new inspiration in human. Examples. The Dominion Lord Vex stood abruptly, his armored form radiating menace. This ends now. The Council has maintained galactic peace for a millennium through strength and discipline. We will not allow two humans to destroy what generations have built. The threat was unmistakable, but Amy was surprised by the response it generated. Instead of the usual deference to Dominion authority, representatives from across the galaxy rose to challenge the intimidation. Peace through fear is not peace, declared a young architect whose name Amy didn't recognize. It is delayed conflict. The humans have shown us that cooperation based on mutual benefit creates stronger foundations than obedience based on threat. The chamber erupted again as species that had remained silent for centuries began voicing decades of suppressed grievances. The Dominion Lords had maintained order through military strength, but that strength was meaningless if the populations they controlled no longer respected their authority. The Council recognizes that unprecedented circumstances require unprecedented measures, the first speaker announced, their voice cutting through the chaos. Therefore, we will take a formal vote on the human proposals. All member species will participate. The decision will be binding on all galactic civilization. The voting process took hours as representatives from hundreds of species cast their positions. The traditional electronic voting system proved inadequate for the complexity of the decision, with many species requesting to split their votes or register conditional approvals. When the results were finally tallied, the chamber fell silent. The vote was almost perfectly split, with the progressive faction supporting human integration and the traditionalist faction opposing it. For the first time in Council history, there was no clear majority. The vote is inconclusive. The first speaker announced. Under these circumstances, Council protocol requires a period of reflection and re-evaluation. Protocol also allows for emergency measures when the Council cannot reach consensus, the Dominion Lord Vex interrupted. I invoke emergency powers under Article 12 of the Galactic Charter. The invocation of emergency powers sent ripples of shock through the chamber. Article 12 had never been used in recorded history. It granted the Dominion Lords authority to act independently of Council approval when galactic stability was threatened. This is unprecedented, the architect Kira protested. The emergency powers were designed for external threats, not internal political disputes. The humans represent an external threat, Vex replied coldly. They have destabilized galactic civilization in just 1 week. If allowed to continue, they will destroy everything we have built. The first speaker looked older than their millennia of existence as they processed the implications. The emergency powers require a 72-hour notice period. All parties will have time to prepare final positions. As the session ended, Amy realized that the vote had accomplished something no one had intended. Instead of resolving the crisis, it had formalized the split in galactic civilization. The galaxy now had two competing visions of its future, and neither side was willing to compromise. We have 72 hours, David said quietly as they left the chamber. After that, this becomes something bigger than a diplomatic dispute. Amy nodded, watching the heated discussions continuing throughout the station. The galaxy is choosing sides. The question is whether we'll be ready for what comes next. The next 3 days would determine whether the galaxy would find a peaceful resolution to its crisis, or whether the ancient fears of chaos and conflict would prove prophetic after all. The emergency broadcast began at exactly 0800 Galactic Standard Time, simultaneously transmitted to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Amy had spent the past 72 hours preparing the data compilation that would either free galactic civilization or condemn humanity to extinction. The hidden records she had discovered painted a picture of systematic deception that spanned centuries. Citizens of the galaxy, David's voice carried across space to billions of beings on thousands of worlds. We bring you evidence that the Galactic Council has been lying to you for over 800 years. The first document appeared on screens across the galaxy, showing the original records of the conflict that had supposedly justified the Council's restrictive policies. The ancient war that had been described as a chaotic free-for-all between innovative species was actually a carefully orchestrated campaign by the Dominion Lords to eliminate potential rivals. The species that died in the so-called Chaos Wars were not aggressive expansionists, Amy explained as the evidence scrolled past. They were innovators who had developed technologies that threatened Dominion military supremacy. The wars were not caused by growth and change. They were caused by those who feared growth and change. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. On world after world, populations that had accepted limitations for centuries suddenly understood that those limitations were not natural laws but artificial constraints imposed by those who benefited from their enforcement. The response from the Dominion Lords was swift and brutal. Within hours of the broadcast, Dominion fleets were moving toward human space, their massive dreadnoughts emerging from hidden bases throughout the galaxy. The emergency powers that had been invoked to maintain stability were now being used to eliminate the source of instability. All human vessels are ordered to surrender immediately, the Dominion Lord Vex announced in a galaxy-wide transmission. The species designated as human will be relocated to supervised colonies where they can no longer threaten galactic civilization. But the Dominion Lords had underestimated the effect of Amy's revelations. The same broadcast that had exposed their deception had also inspired resistance throughout the galaxy. Young collectors abandoned their hives to join independent vessels. Luminary energy beings broke free from their containment zones. Architect apprentices began modifying their crystalline structures for combat rather than construction. The first battle occurred in the Vega system, where a Dominion patrol encountered a mixed fleet of human and alien vessels. The engagement lasted only minutes, but the tactical recordings showed something unprecedented in galactic history. The Alliance ships fought with perfect coordination despite their vastly different technologies and combat philosophies. The humans aren't just fighting for themselves, reported the architect Kira from her position aboard the mixed fleet flagship. They're teaching other species how to fight for themselves. They're not trying to lead the resistance. They're trying to make it unnecessary for anyone to lead. The concept was revolutionary in more ways than one. Previous galactic conflicts had been struggles between competing hierarchies with one authority seeking to replace another. The human approach was different. They were empowering individual species and even individuals to make their own choices about their future. The war that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. The Dominion Lords commanded massive fleets and ancient weapons, but their rigid command structure proved vulnerable to the adaptive tactics employed by the Alliance forces. Human military doctrine emphasized flexibility and innovation, principles that spread rapidly through the Allied fleets. Amy found herself coordinating the technological revolution that accompanied the military one. The shared databases that had been restricted by Council protocols were suddenly open to all species. The innovations that had been suppressed to maintain stability were being combined in ways that produced exponential advances. The Kepler 7 restoration was just the beginning, she reported to the Alliance command structure. We're seeing breakthrough developments in energy production, faster-than-light travel, and biological enhancement. The galaxy is experiencing more technological advancement in 6 months than it had in the previous 6 centuries. The turning point came when the Alliance forces discovered the location of the Dominion home base, a massive fortress hidden in the galactic core. The final battle was not won through superior firepower, but through superior understanding. The Dominion Lords had built their defenses around the assumption that their enemies would fight like traditional military forces. Instead, the Alliance employed tactics that combined human creativity with alien capabilities in ways that the Dominion's ancient computers couldn't process. Luminary energy beings merged with human electronic warfare systems. Architect structures provided defense platforms that could be reconfigured in real time. Collector individuals coordinated fleet movements with precision that exceeded their original hive mind capabilities. David watched from the Alliance command ship as the Dominion fortress, which had stood unconquered for over 2 millennia, fell to forces that refused to accept the limitations that had defined galactic warfare for centuries. The final transmission from the Dominion Lord Vex was a mixture of rage and bewilderment at tactics that violated every principle of established military doctrine. "You have doomed the galaxy to chaos," Vex declared as his fortress crumbled around him. "Without order, without control, civilizations will tear themselves apart as they did before. Without growth, without choice, civilizations tear themselves apart anyway," David replied. "They just do it more slowly." The aftermath of the Dominion defeat brought challenges that no one had fully anticipated. The rigid structures that had maintained galactic civilization for a millennium were gone, leaving billions of beings to figure out how to govern themselves without the authority they had always accepted. Amy found herself at the center of the most complex diplomatic challenge. In galactic history, representatives from hundreds of species gathered at the former Nexus station, now renamed the Unity Platform, to establish new frameworks for interspecies cooperation. "The old council claimed authority through age and power," she addressed the assembled delegates. "We propose authority through consent and contribution. No species should be forced to accept decisions made by others, but all species should be free to cooperate when it benefits everyone." The new Galactic Federation that emerged was messy, chaotic, and completely unprecedented. Species were free to develop at their own pace, to innovate without restriction, to explore beyond their traditional boundaries. Some chose to maintain their traditional ways, while others embraced radical change. The architects began constructing wonders that combined functionality with beauty in ways their rigid protocols had never allowed. The luminari spread throughout the galaxy, their energy forms no longer confined to predetermined zones. The collectors discovered that individual consciousness enhanced rather than diminished their collective capabilities. Not everything went smoothly. Some species struggled with the transition from rigid order to flexible cooperation. Conflicts arose over resources and territory, requiring new forms of negotiation and compromise. The galaxy experienced growing pains as it learned to function without the artificial stability imposed by the Council. But the overall trend was unmistakably positive. Birth rates increased across multiple species as populations found new reasons for optimism. Technological development accelerated as innovations were shared freely rather than restricted by protocol. Trade networks expanded as species discovered mutual benefits that had been impossible under the old system. 5 years after the revolution, David and Amy stood in the observation deck of the Unity platform, watching ships from dozens of species coming and going in patterns that would have been impossible under Council control. The ordered efficiency of the old system had been replaced by something more chaotic but infinitely more alive. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Amy asked, watching a group of young beings from various species working together on a project that none of their individual species could have accomplished alone. David smiled as he observed the controlled chaos of the new galactic civilization. "Look around, birth rates are up. Innovation is accelerating. Species that were dying are thriving again. Young beings are choosing their own paths instead of accepting predetermined roles." A message indicator chimed, showing reports from the latest exploration missions. Human ships were working with alien partners to investigate regions of the galaxy that had been forbidden under Council rules. The discoveries were revolutionizing. Understanding of galactic history and opening possibilities that had been unimaginable just years before. "The galaxy isn't perfect," David continued, "but it's alive again, it's growing, it's changing. It's becoming something better than what it was." Amy nodded, watching a group of human children playing with young aliens of various species, their games creating new forms of interaction that transcended the boundaries their parents had always accepted. The future was uncertain in ways that would have terrified the old Council, but that uncertainty was filled with potential rather than dread. 2 humans entered the Galactic Council and changed everything forever, she mused. But maybe the real change was that the galaxy was ready to change. We just gave it permission. The Unity platform continued its orbit, no longer a symbol of rigid control but a beacon of cooperative possibility. The galaxy had chosen growth over stagnation, freedom over security, and hope over fear. The revolution that had started with 2 humans refusing to accept limitations had become a transformation that touched every world and every life in galactic civilization. The future was unwritten, and for the first time in a millennium, that was exactly as it should be.